He is the most boring interview. He used to sell his movies on Leno and Letterman, and it was like watching a WNBA game. You just were just bored to death. All of a sudden, Trump became president, and he started saying things, I want to punch the president in the face. You know, he's a crooked piece of... And then all of a sudden, De Niro became interesting during his media tours. And that's the only way now he can get publicity for his film, is by cursing and saying...
Whoa, this is sad. Here you have someone pretending to be a tough guy turn out to be just a second banana for Joy Behar, the poster child for Trump derangement. Sadly, Bob is now just another gibbering, enfeebled ninny, surrounded by inept relatives as he frets about how Trump's in power and he's not. See, Trump's rise coincides with De Niro's decline. And the person who knows it most is De Niro. He's a fine example of how not to turn loss into bitterness. There are plenty of people who don't like Trump, but don't let it warp their minds or their ability to speak aloud among grown-ups or The View. But the Schiffs and De Niros of the world are emotionally damaged by politics to a point where they can't even assess their own emotions.
What happens when Fox News' favorite fun-sized firecracker, Greg Gutfeld, decides to lock horns with Hollywood's grumpiest, most politically agitated grandpa, Robert De Niro? Oh, you just get a verbal smackdown so utterly brutal, so hilariously savage, it makes De Niro's iconic performance in Raging Bull look like a gentle, meditative yoga class. De Niro, the man who once commanded the screen with a glance, tried to act tough, tried to project that legendary intensity. But Gutfeld, armed with sarcasm, sass, and a punchline that reportedly left Bobby completely speechless, came in swinging. Curious how a late-night host allegedly wrecked a cinematic legend without even sharing the same stage. Buckle up, because this roast session is one for the Oscars. If the Oscars gave awards for sheer, unadulterated verbal carnage.
Last night, an elderly, confused man went missing in New York. Luckily, a band of self-satisfied elitists found him babbling on the street, threw some pants on him, gave him a stage.
Oh my God.
I'm going to say one thing. Trump.
What happens when Fox News' favorite fun-sized firecracker, Greg Gutfeld, decides to lock horns with Hollywood's grumpiest, most politically agitated grandpa, Robert De Niro? Oh, you just get a verbal smackdown so utterly brutal, so hilariously savage, it makes De Niro's iconic performance in Raging Bull look like a gentle, meditative yoga class. De Niro, the man who once commanded the screen with a glance, tried to act tough, tried to project that legendary intensity. But Gutfeld, armed with sarcasm, sass, and a punchline that reportedly left Bobby completely speechless, came in swinging. Curious how a late-night host allegedly wrecked a cinematic legend without even sharing the same stage. Buckle up, because this roast session is one for the Oscars. If the Oscars gave awards for sheer, unadulterated verbal carnage.
Robert De Niro graced the knitting circle in hell known as The View, where he tried to link random thoughts into a sentence. Joy was there to wind him up, since he's played some of the most unredeemable characters.
You have played some of the most really unredeemable characters. Travis Bickle. Travis Bickle was a psychopathic taxi driver. Jake LaMotta, who used to beat his wife, and he was in the Raging Bull. Is Trump worse than they are?
To me.
Once upon a time, in the land of former glory and long-forgotten Oscars, Robert De Niro decided he wasn't just an actor anymore. No. He was now, apparently, the official spokesperson for moral righteousness, political clarity, and a uniquely Hollywood-fueled brand of indignation. Because clearly, when a nation faces complicated, multifaceted issues, what it really needs is an 80-year-old movie star shouting from the gilded penthouse of his Manhattan high-rise about how everyone else is doing life profoundly wrong. De Niro even graced the knitting circle in hell known as The View, where he reportedly tried and failed to link random, angry thoughts into a coherent sentence, all while Joy Behar presumably wound him up like a talking doll.
Being an actor is tough, for how does one handle real life without a script? Not equipped to think analytically, you're left powerless when observing your own predictions about life turn out wrong. It's not supposed to be this way, De Niro thinks. Only the cool guys get to win. Sorry, Bob, that's only in the movies, but at least you'll always have joy.
Enter Greg Gutfeld, the man who looks like he mainlines Reddit arguments just to stay sharp. But somehow, against all odds and possibly common sense, he managed to pull off what most media commentators wouldn't even dare: a high-definition, sarcasm-powered takedown of Hollywood's loudest and arguably most disconnected moral megaphone. And he did it not with yelling, not with screaming, not with the usual cable news theatrics. No, Gutfeld deployed the kind of dry, devastating wit that could dehydrate an entire rainforest with a single, well-placed smirk. Being an actor is tough, Gutfeld seemed to imply. How does one handle real life without a pre-written script? When you're not equipped to think analytically, you're left utterly powerless when observing your own dire predictions about life and politics turn out spectacularly wrong. It's not supposed to be this way. De Niro internally thinks, according to Gutfeld, only the cool guys get to win. Sorry, Bob, Gutfeld retorts, that only happens in the movies. But hey, at least you'll always have joy.
It kills me. Talk about persuasive. Really, I was on the fence about Trump, but then I decided to really listen to one of the great generational leaders of American pop culture. And the clenched fists at the end, that really drove it home. It looked like he was pressing a 2-pound weight in a Jenny Craig commercial.
Oh my God.
Look at it again. It's so cute. It's like he found out the restaurant serves Jell-O, or that he won a $10 scratch off, or he scored a cameo in Jersey Shore, or he had his first #2 in a week.
De Niro used to be a cultural force, a titan. He was the guy you watched in classic mafia flicks while nervously glancing over your own shoulder, just in case. Now he's the guy who shows up uninvited to political events, usually outside courthouses, with a facial expression that screams, "I just ate an entire lemon," and also, "Democracy is actively dying right before my very eyes." The man turned brooding into a high art form, but recently he's been brooding so relentlessly, so performatively, it's starting to look less like artistic depth and more like a chronic, untreated condition of terminal grumpiness. That kills Gutfeld. He mocks the persuasive power of De Niro's public appearances. The clenched fists at the end of a rant looking like he was pressing a 2-pound weight in a Jenny Craig commercial. It's so cute, Gutfeld sneers, like De Niro just found out the restaurant serves Jell-O. Or he won a $10 scratch-off, or maybe, just maybe, he had his first #2 in a week.
Yeah, poor Bob. You know, he's like a star whose girlfriend dumps him for a bigger star who's in the White House while you're in Dirty Grandpa. Oh, man. So now the resistance is reduced to applauding tantrums. Who knew De Niro's lasting role would be irrelevant gas bag, pleasing irrelevant peers? And he's doing this as Trump organizes a summit. Not a war, a summit. And you got to wonder, if it were President Hillary, Bob's choice, would you actually have a summit or would you have a war? But forget deeds. What matters is adulation received from an emotional display before a packed sea of millionaire lemmings. So who cares that Trump meets with North Korea? It's no meet the parents. Right, Travis?
Gutfeld didn't even need a physical stage for this demolition. He just needed a spotlight, a microphone, and a healthy dash of common sense. And when he turned that spotlight squarely on De Niro, let's just say the legendary actor didn't exactly sparkle under the harsh glare of scrutiny. Turns out, when you peel back the layers of angry, out-of-touch Hollywood elite energy, what you often find is a man whose idea of connecting with everyday Americans is to yell at them in interviews they never asked for, from a reality they'll never inhabit. While De Niro was out there passionately performing his latest unscripted role, America's most outraged grandpa, Gutfeld was calmly taking meticulous notes. Not because he wanted acting lessons, oh no, but because he was diligently studying the rare and fascinating species known as the unintentionally hilarious celebrity. It's a creature that thrives in the controlled environment of award shows, becomes most vocal and agitated during election cycles, and feeds exclusively on its own perceived self-importance.
What a sad end for a great actor. He went from Raging Bull to this. You know, De Niro kind of represents Hollywood in the sense that they realize that they're losing influence with the public, and that's what's generating the emotional response. They've never felt less important.
De Niro, you see, has mastered the art of talking down while standing on an award stage. He seems to genuinely believe that every sentence he utters is a profound monologue, and every audience is a captive one, desperate for his wisdom. But this time, someone in the back row, metaphorically speaking, raised a very sarcastic eyebrow, and it belonged to Greg Gutfeld. And let's be clear, Gutfeld didn't take De Niro on with rage or indignation. He took him on with withering eye rolls and a comedic sensibility that exposed the absurdity of it all. Poor Bob, Gutfeld seems to sigh. He's like a star whose girlfriend dumps him for a bigger star who's in the White House, while you're stuck in Dirty Grandpa 3, still dirty. So now the resistance is reduced to applauding these public tantrums. Who knew De Niro's lasting cinematic role would be irrelevant gasbag-pleasing, irrelevant peers? He's doing all this, Gutfeld notes, as Trump is out there organizing actual summits, not wars. But forget deeds. What truly matters is the adulation received from an emotional display before a packed sea of millionaire lemmings. So who cares if Trump meets with North Korea? It's no meet the parents, right, Travis?
To you, let's go to, I think he was in Canada, Toronto, opening a restaurant or doing something, and this is what he had to say.
And I just want to make a note of apology for the idiotic behavior of my president. It's a disgrace. And I apologize to Justin Trudeau, and the other people at the G7. It's disgusting.
You know, I actually feel bad for him because I think he's one of those people that has never been emotionally recovered from 2016. This is a guy who's got serious Trump disorder.
Gutfeld simply, almost casually, pointed out the reality everyone else was thinking, but perhaps too polite or too intimidated to say out loud. Like how utterly fascinating it is that a man who has spent decades pretending to be other, often morally bankrupt, people suddenly thinks he's uniquely qualified to lecture the entire public on who they should be. This isn't just irony, folks. This is irony wearing a bespoke tuxedo, sipping champagne, and crashing a charity gala it wasn't invited to. What really sealed De Niro's fate in this roast was the stark contrast. De Niro delivers his political opinions with the emotional nuance of a soap opera character who just found out they have an evil twin and a surprise inheritance in the same episode. Meanwhile, Gutfeld delivered his counterpoints with the dry, almost bored tone of someone reviewing a particularly terrible Yelp experience. While De Niro puffed out his metaphorical chest like a grumpy rooster who just discovered Twitter, Gutfeld calmly outlined the glaring disconnect. The idea that someone who probably hasn't set foot in a Walmart since VHS was a cutting-edge technology is now claiming to speak for, and to, the working class. The math, as Gutfeld would say, simply ain't mathin'.
Niro clearly has thought about this, more so than his career. His choice of roles is now down to cinnamon and lobster. He was then asked about the Trump kids. At least he doesn't want my kids to take this the wrong way.
I don't want my kids to take this the wrong way, but if my kids did what these kids did, I wouldn't want to be related to them. I would disown them.
You could practically hear the collective crumbling of De Niro's remaining public legacy as Gutfeld laid out the greatest sin of all in the modern media age: irrelevance. Not because De Niro has aged, not because he's past his acting prime necessarily, but because he has tragically mistaken his residual fame for ongoing infallibility. In Hollywood, that's not just a faux pas, it's a terminal illness of the ego. Gutfeld, in his signature deadpan style, did the comedic equivalent of holding up a giant, unflattering mirror. And De Niro clearly didn't like the reflection, because instead of seeing Travis Bickle or Vito Corleone staring back, he saw an out-of-touch millionaire wagging his finger angrily at the plebs from the safety of his gated garden.
Jesse, I find that he's smartest when they drop his audio. But, you know, it's kind of sad because you can see, like, people who are stuck in some kind of, I don't know, derangement, they can't see it themselves. And they're not surrounded by people telling them that they have a problem. And they lack self-awareness because everybody either tells them they're wonderful or wants to sell them cocaine. So he has no clue what he's doing, and he's upset over the emotional nature. His anger is emotional about Trump. It's nothing practical.
You're right.
Now, the best part of this whole takedown? Gutfeld didn't even need to try that hard. De Niro practically handed him the comedic material on a silver platter, wrapped in righteous fury and generously sprinkled with dramatic, unnecessary pauses. The man has, in essence, become the human version of an angry, rambling Facebook comment. This wasn't a fair fight. It was a one-man comedy set with De Niro as the unwitting and increasingly unwilling punchline. Gutfeld played the crowd, De Niro played himself, and unfortunately for him, the audience clearly knew the difference. When Gutfeld started referencing actual statistics or pointing out the glaring logical contradictions in De Niro's tirades, things escalated. Not because Gutfeld shouted louder, but because he whispered smarter. That's the devastating thing about well-aimed sarcasm. It slices quietly but leaves a deep, stinging mark. He took surgical jabs at the very concept of celebrity activism being treated as gospel. Because yes, if there's anything that screams real-life struggle, it's someone who spends their weekends in Cannes and their weekdays yelling about perceived injustice from the back of a luxury SUV. What a sad, almost tragic end for a once great actor. He went from raging bull to this. De Niro, as Gutfeld paints him, now represents the Hollywood elite's dawning realization that they're losing influence with the public. And that's what's generating this desperate, emotional response. They've never felt less important. The crowd they used to command isn't just tuning out, they're actively entertained by their decline. Gutfeld didn't need to destroy him. De Niro did that all by himself, just by opening his mouth and reminding everyone that his current grasp of politics is about as nuanced and informed as a high school debate team member who did all their research on espresso. This wasn't just a roast, it was a public service announcement about the perils of unchecked ego and the slow, sad fizzle of a legend who forgot to evolve past his own monologue.